But you would do things regularly, for instance, sticking with Indonesia, that would feed your doubt. For instance, if I remember correctly, in Indonesia, you went out with a local person there who took you to meet people who lived there, and they openly challenged in casual conversation some of the things you were doing.
That's correct. I've always liked people a lot, and originally I wanted to be a journalist, and I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I loved being with the people. So when I was in Indonesia, this young man, his name was Razi, who I lived in the same house as him. He lived in the guest house. His mother ran the guest house where our team lived. And he introduced me to a lot of his friends, and I loved being with them, these Indonesian people. I learned to speak Bahasa Indonesia quite well at the time. And so I spent a lot of time with them. And yeah, they were quite radical. And there's a whole series in the book about some of the experiences I had with them, going to puppet shows, their politics, their anger at what we were doing in Vietnam. And I agreed with them, and they were quite stunned that I would agree with them so much. And they took me into these amazing, beautiful parts of the city, the old city of Bandung, which is in West Java. We were working out of Jakarta and Bandung, and I was traveling around a lot in Indonesia. I was always shocked by how there were no other foreigners in those parts of the city. No other foreigners really hanging out with the Indonesians. There were quite a few foreigners, oil company people and people like my own team. We all hung out at these private clubs and the fancy restaurants, but didn't hang out with the Indonesians very much. And I did, and I really, really enjoyed it. And they questioned me a lot, and they pointed out that Arnold Toynbee, the great British historian, in 1954 had written a book called Civilization on Trial, which said that in the long run, the Muslim people are the biggest threat to capitalism, to the U.S. way. Back in 54, he said it isn't communism. That's not ultimately a threat because it's not spiritual enough. It's not based in any real strong principles. For a culture to succeed, it has to be very principled. And he demised the fall of capitalism, what he called the West, because he said ultimately we won't be that principled either, and that the Islamic world would rise up because they had these strong beliefs in spirituality, and they don't believe in usury, and they don't believe in lending money. And these young Muslims in Indonesia pointed that out to me and said, you guys are in trouble. This is back in the early 70s, and they said, the Muslim world is watching, and we don't like what we're seeing. It was an amazing forewarning for, if you look at what's going on now in the world, the Muslims have become very powerful and very, very angry at us. And it isn't simply about religion by any means. The Muslim religion at heart is not an angry religion. It's a compassionate religion. But they're very angry because they see us as basically raping their world, pillaging it. And, they were always quoting statistics to me. We have a statistic that we throw around in this country a lot, that 5% of the world's population, us, the American population, consumes 25% of the world's resources. Now, that really bothers most of the rest of the world, that we're like this great octopus that reaches out with its tentacles and brings all the resources into us, and look at the lives we lead, while 3/4 of the world lives in destitution. Every day, 24,000 people die of starvation. And 30,000 children die of curable diseases every single day. And the people who live in the places where that's happening are angry. And they see us 5% of the world's population bringing in 25% of its resources, while so many of them live tragic, destitute, miserable, suffering lives. Needlessly suffering. It doesn't have to happen. But an even more important statistic, I believe, is that of that 5% of the world's population, only less than 1% controls more of America's resources than the 90% at the bottom. So, in fact, 25% of the world's resources are being funneled into this country essentially to serve 1% of 5% of the world's population. Terribly small. It's not even a pyramid. It's like a needle going up with a few very wealthy, very powerful people sitting on the top. It's created tremendous resentment around the world. It's what's created our insecurity. I would suggest that we will never be secure in this country, no matter how many guards we have at our airports, until we decide that we're going to be a lot more compassionate with the world. And what a great thing that is to do. That will bring us the security that we need, is when we start really opening ourselves up to the world and welcoming the world as brothers and sisters who we want to share the goodies with. And back in those days in Indonesia, these young Islamic people who I fell in love with and was working with, they saw all this. They anticipated it, and they warned me about it. And it was a very telling experience for me, very moving. And yet, I was seduced. Sex, money, and power was coming my way, man, and I was gonna take it, and I did.